Okay, let's try this again. As expected, immediately when I pushed start, everything immediately crashed. That's what I've come to expect in in this fine art that is streaming. All right, where was I going to begin? Welcome to episode 2 of the Superior Stream. Today we're going to cover or go over a number of topics ranging from Kojima and Konami with their falling out, elderly people not understanding technology, Game Boys and their lateral design, Steam and their mods, and much more. But first off, a brief anecdote. And go ahead and start the game here. Ooh, there we go. Uh, what you're watching right now, by the way, is pre-recorded content. This isn't live, which is the way I'm going to do it from now on, because playing a game, giving commentary, and managing the technical aspects of a podcast slash stream, it's an arduous task to say the least. But like I said, I have a small anecdote. Before the stream, I was looking through my refrigerator, and I was gonna get some French fries to cook. I like French fries. I'm big on unhealthy foods, and I got the fries out, and I looked next to the fries, and I had frozen waffles, and I looked at these waffles, and I looked at my little fry cooker, and I'm thinking, man, I wonder how French fried waffles would taste. And like I stopped myself after that thought because it occurred to me, wow, how unhealthy am I to be contemplating French fried waffles? I know, like I just after thinking that thought, I figured I'm gonna have to do some jumping jacks to redeem myself later because this is all kinds of unhealthy. But that's just a little speck, a tiny tidbit into my world. And let me take a look see here. I may need to adjust one more thing. Like I said, before this got live, like everything that I had set up before more or less kind of disappeared. So I kind of have to recalibrate everything. And it looks like I may be losing a bit of my video quality. So give me just a second here. This time it's going to work a little bit better, I think. Because what I can do, I can pause the stream, and what I'm going to do, take a look see here. Okay. And I'm gonna see if this will work midstream. I'm not sure if it'll will, but I want to try it anyway here. And let's kick her back into high gear. There we go. And okay, yeah, that looks a little bit. That looks a bit better. And where was I? Oh yeah, fried waffles. Yeah, if you're eating fried waffles, you're off the tracks. You're not even near the train tracks anymore. You're lost. There's no saving you. Uh, but let me take a quick look at my little docket here, see where I want to begin. Follow up on the first show. The first show, what a disaster. Really it was. My problems ranged from technical stuff starting out just like this episode did, all the way through the show, having to switch to, live gaming, and then switching to another game. Uh, I said the quality of the video was, it was satisfactory for the most part, but even then, uh, having to manage the gameplay, the video, and all those aspects all together, it was an arduous task, like I said, to say the least. So like I said, for the future, I'll be using pre-recorded gaming videos and such if I'm going to be doing, like I said, a traditional stream like we're doing right now. That way I can focus more on talking. Uh, like I said, if my mind happens to wander, there's less things for me to be distracted by. So, really, that's good. Um, really, I think the key problem with the first show was there was way too much input for me. Like I said, it's just too much for me to handle at once. Like I said, if you've ever done any kind of streaming, like I said, being able to talk and you know keep up some kind of interesting diatribe. I like that word, but that's not what that word means. To keep up the conversation, as it were, with no one but myself. It's hard enough just talking to yourself, but you know, actually making sense while you're playing a game, while you're managing the podcast, all together. That's really what it makes me feel like the first show really was not up to par with where I was wanting it to be. Uh, let's see. Going over the next point here, future show format. As I've already mentioned, like I said, it's gonna be pre-recorded content. I said now this is just for right now. Maybe in the future I may do a live stream where I'm actually playing a game live for a podcast, but I don't think I will because I like being able to concentrate solely on what I'm talking about rather than having to, like I said, juggle uh, juggle like I said, gameplay and techno wizardry. And it does not help that my techno wizardry is not that good to begin with. Um, Also, my microphone volume seems a bit high. I'm gonna turn it down just a tad bit. Oh, oh, yeah. Oh, okay, right around. Yeah, that'll do. That'll do, pig. That'll do. All right. Um, I may also just switch over to a static background. Like I said, I can switch to it right now if I want to. This is the, oops, actually that's not quite it. Let me fix it for you real quick here. There we go. It's the 2 minutes to midnight picture, which I'll use as static background if my game crashes or something else occurs. But let me go ahead and turn the game back on real quick. Yeah. I like that image, it's iconic. Uh, I've always liked the idea of a doomsday clock. So that'll be my static image until I find something that I like better to fill in the background space if I should ever lose my main video feed. Um, where to go to next? Up, 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 up. Da, da, da. Okay. In no particular order. Well, no, actually, it is in a somewhat of a particular order. Uh, Gunpei Yokai. Alright, do you know who this guy is? Unless you're big on Nintendo products, you probably don't. If you're not familiar with Gunpei Yokai, he developed the Game Boy along with the Virtual Boy. And before those more iconic items, he also developed the Game & Watch and a number of small toys for Nintendo. Alright? And why am I bringing up Gunpei Yokai? You know, what does he have to do with PC gaming? Well, or just any gaming in general, for that matter. Well, of course, like I said, Game Boy is a very important stepping stone. You can't think of mobile gaming without Gunpei Yonkai. Um, what I like most when I learned about this guy, as a designer, he was big on lateral innovation, which is to take existing technology and repurpose it so you get the most out of that technology. Like I said, the Game Boy was more or less a little crumpet-sized NES console. I believe the NES released 1985 in Japan, and then in 1986 in the US. And the Game Boy followed suit a little while after. I'll have to pull up the Wikipedia, but it wasn't too far after. And what you had at that point, like I said, was really a mobile version of the NES. Sans a few color graphics. And of course you'd get Game Boy Color, not to be confused with Color Game Boy, a few years down the road. And of course the Game Boy Advance after the Game Boy Color. But like I said, I'll save that for another time, I think. But like I said, lateral design. How could you take some notes from Gunpei Yokai, if you're a developer today? You know, what would be the thing to remember from him? Like I said, I think, like I said, a lot of problems I see with PC gaming is we're always rushing to get to the highest fidelity of graphics, the best possible look of games. And I'm not against that, in theory. I want us, as gamers, and for the simple technology's sake, to be developing the best possible looking games, the best playing games you can. But I don't think, like I said, you should abandon necessarily technology that already exists for the sake of just simply looking better, when you can innovate on technology you already have and make a superior product. And like I said, the poster child of that. Let's see here. One second. My microphone is picking up some of the stuff from the in-game audio. One second. That's a little bit annoying. Oh wait, no. Is it? No, that's something else. Sorry. I thought it was picking up some in-game audio, but that was just me not reading my little readouts correctly. Okay. Where was I? Yes, lateral design. Are there any other examples of lateral design I can think of? Actually, not off the top of my head. That's something I probably should have researched a bit more. But Gunpei Yokai, like I said, I've been wanting to talk about him for a while. And if you want to watch a more in-depth video about it, G4, if you're familiar with that network, or as it used to be Tech TV before that, had a show called Icons, and they basically go over all kinds of iconic people in the tech and video game industry. And one of the videos or documentaries they did, and so it's a short thing, it's only like 20 minutes, was a short on Gunpei Yokai. And they basically explain how he, pretty much he just destroyed the mobile gaming market, like the competition in his heyday. They had the Neo Geo, the Jaguar, like it was a mobile Atari console. All these ridiculously powerful gaming handhelds, that, like I said, the Game Boy should have had no right to stand up against, in graphics-wise. But it was the Game Boy's battery life, and like I said, it's simplicity really. It's what beat out the more advanced systems. And you look at that, and you look at Nintendo today. It's like, what is Nintendo doing differently today that they're that they're not doing right now, or doing differently now that they were doing, like when they were making the Game Boy. Like I said, the DS, I haven't looked at the sales numbers on it, but I'm not sure if it's doing as well as it could be doing. I know it's doing really good, but is it selling Game Boy numbers? Honestly, I don't think you could ever sell Game Boy numbers. Not anymore, for at least for Nintendo. Like I said, with the advent of cell phone games and such, it's not going to happen. And that leads me to another point, which I don't have fully researched, but I've been interested in it, is that Nintendo is looking at expanding into the mobile game market for cell phones and such, And that makes sense, because Nintendo, their Wii U's, as I've heard, and I've definitely seen a few sales reports, they're not doing as well as they probably should be doing for a Nintendo product at the very least. So I would not be surprised if Nintendo is looking for ways to expand its economic horizons. The way it can do that, like I said, is expanding into the mobile phone, tablet, so forth, game market. And they can still, like I said, make DS's or whatever kind of handheld they're gonna make. But if they just release those IPs and those licenses for mobile games, I don't think there's anyone who's gonna not buy it because it's a Nintendo product. They're going to buy it because it's a Nintendo product, because they know they have that official Nintendo seal of quality. The only issue I might see arise, maybe, not all cell phones are created, equally, so I'm not sure if they could exactly port their entire library over to, say, an iPhone or a tablet or whatever. But for the most part, I think most cell phones today, most tablets and stuff, they're gradually becoming more and more, like I said, the lines are blurring between one phone and another. Pretty much, if your one phone can play video games, so could another one, pretty much. And that's really becoming like the baseline entry-level mobile phone nowadays. And it seems very commonsensical, as it were, but back in my day, the idea of having a cell phone and like a gaming console and a whole computer in your wallet, or about the size of your wallet, was like insane. If you told me I would have a device like that in this year, I would have been like, no way, not possible. But here we are. We have like pocket-sized computers now. Of course, I'm like the billionth person to say this, of course, being an older person. And I'm sure there's some people older than me who can remember a time before cell phones. But now I'm just rambling. Let me get back on track here. I veered from one topic into another, and it just keeps going off the rails. So let's go back here and Steam mods. Okay. What are Steam mods? And why should you care? Do you even play video games? I hope you do. Anyway, for those of you not know, PC gaming, one of the biggest platforms on PC gaming. No, it is the biggest platform. Who am I fooling? Steam. Okay. PC gaming. What is PC gaming almost synonymous with as much as Steam? That would have to be mods, or modding your games. That and maybe Facebook or something, but definitely when it comes to PC games, it's the ability to mod your game. That's really what I think sets PC gaming apart, a big hunk apart from traditional console games. And as of late, Steam attempted, keyword being attempted here, to start charging for mods for one game. It was Skyrim. And while I'm not saying this correctly, what they did, right? They contacted, I believe, individual modders and let them know, we want you to be able to sell your content on our distribution platform. We'll give you 25% of the purchase price you set for the game, in profits, of course, and the other 75% will go to the Steam platform and the original publisher of the game you're making the mod for. In this case, like I said, it was for Skyrim. And naturally, a lot of people were a little bit standoffish about this. The reason being that modding is traditionally considered a platform that is absolutely free. That means you don't pay for mods. Mods are made by the community for the community, and distributed, like I said, freely. This, like I said, announcement, it started a fire. It definitely lit the fire under a lot of people's asses. Gabe's email inbox was flooded with people decrying this, like, as the death of PC gaming. It's like, you're killing PC gaming, Gabe. And I'm referring to Gabe Newell. He's the guy who owns Steam. Gabe's inbox, along with the inbox of the Steam support forums and so forth, they were just completely overwhelmed. Faxes were sent in somewhat of a malicious nature to eat up their fax machines, and their forums were just post after post after post of, you cannot do this. Please do not make Steam mods. Do not make them cost money. That's about the gist of it. Like I said, this was not just like 10 or 20 people. This was like the whole, like almost, I would say, a good 70 to 80% of the community. There's not very many people who openly support the, how would you say this? Buyable Steam mods? Pay for mod system? Like I said, it's so new, it doesn't even have a name. Let's just say it's mods you have to pay for. So like I said, inboxes were flooded, tantrums were thrown, like people were losing their minds, and deservedly so, because like I said, as a person who plays on PC, as a guy who's used his fair share of mods across multiple games, not particularly for Skyrim, because that's not my cup of tea, but suffice to say, if my game required me to pay for mods, I would be upset at the very least, especially considering, like I said, that if you've never paid for mods before, and it suddenly transitioned to a system wherein you had to pay for mods in order to use them, which, like I said, was what it was looking like for Skyrim, and they were wanting to implement this system that they had set in place for Skyrim for multiple different games. Like I said, it was going to go all down the line for mods for pretty much every Steam game. And like I said, I have games on Steam, and I use mods on those games on Steam, so, you know, down the road, it was looking like I might get hit by some of this stuff. Now, like I said, luckily, those who were very, very vocal, they spoke out, they said, we don't want this, don't do this, and what happened was, like I said, they reverted this. They took back the pay mod system, pay for mod system. It's no longer going to be implemented. I think they're going to try to reintroduce it as a voluntary donation button. A lot of people were saying they wouldn't mind donating to a mod developer, and like I said, that makes sense to me. You know, I'm not sure if that's the path they're going to go, but it seems as good a path as any. And more news out of Steam. This one is hot off the presses. I just heard about it, I think, last night, and I read a little bit more earlier today. Individual game developers on Steam can now ban you from their game. And what are the stipulations of this? What's the deal with this story? From what I've read thus far, like I said, it's only individual games and assumably on their individual multiplayer servers that you can get banned from. Let's see. Sorry, my brain just stopped working for a second. So, what's the big deal, you know? If they're gonna ban you from games, like I said, they're gonna have a reason. If you're doing, if you're trolling people, or if you're, you know, ruining the community somehow, and the game developers don't want you, you know, playing in that way in their game, I can kind of see where, you know, this has, you know, some usefulness. Because, like I said, it's the internet. The internet is a terrible, terrible place, and that's why I love it, you know. But like I said, there's some people who, you know, take joy in just taking the piss out of people. And like I said, what this developer, or what this new change to the terms of service developers now have, like I said, they can ban you from their game. So what's the significance? How could this be used in a way that would not be very good? You know? Like I said, perhaps maybe if you played their game, you know, and you didn't like it, and you, say, reported bugs or errors the game was giving you, you know, and then they went and banned you from the game because you reported those errors, you know. Would that be an issue? And how would you trace that issue? How would you report that issue? Who would be responsible for dealing with those issues when they arise? Because, like I said, I can see the good behind the action. You know, like I said, they wanna cut down online harassment. They wanna stop people who are actively going into gaming communities and making them crap, and, you know, just nip it in the bud, where the individual community managers, the game developers, can then ban players that are, like I said, just ruining the game. But like I said, when you give that kind of power to an individual developer, you open up, like I said, the floodgates to any number of ways they could abuse that power. And like I said, I'm not calling game developers like the main problem. And I don't think a lot of game developers would abuse this kind of power. I would hope not. But there still exists the possibility that that may occur. And that's another thing people are raging about as I speak. I feel kind of bad for Gabe and his crew over at Valve, because they've just started to tackle the backlog of emails from the whole pay for mod fiasco, and now they're getting just lambasted with yet another series of emails, and no doubt fax bombs which just blow through their ink regarding this developers' rights to ban players. And I'm just thinking, geez, they're never gonna get to the top of these emails, you know, unless they have like some kind of bot or something that can sort through them, you know. If you're good at coding, code a program that can help Valve like sort through all these emails. They'll hire you on tonight. Oh. Oh, geez. What's next? What's next on the docket? The Kojima Ruse Cruise. Alright, what am I talking about? Okay, if you've been paying attention to Konami Kojima or the Metal Gear 5 game for any number of months now. You've been along for what can best be described as a crazy ride. There have been crazy reveals, announcements, and so forth that have been at the very least confusing. All right, and that's like if you even know what's going on, they're confusing. So to a person who's being only half paying attention, it's it's ridiculous. It's like it's hard to tell what's real anymore. What's the deal? Um, where to even start with this? All right, as of the most recently, as of like just a couple days ago, Konami is no longer listed on the stock exchange. They were removed. Now this is their decision, as I understand. You know, why is this? Uh, some people are speculating it's because Kojima left, and by extension of Mr. Kojima leaving, he took with him like his team and a number of other projects he was working on. So, like I said, does that directly correlate to Kojima leaving? Is it a coincidence? No, what's the deal? Uh, Looking at Kojima, you know, what's going on with Kojima? Kojima himself, the man behind Metal Gear, has claimed Metal Gear 5, or V, as some have taken to calling it, it'll be the last Metal Gear game. Somehow I doubt that. But you know that's the official word from Kojima-san. And people are arguably, well, not arguably, but I would say understandably up in arms over this, you know, because Metal Gear is the favorite franchise of a lot of folks. It's one of my favorite games. I wouldn't say it's my most favorite game. You know, Star Ocean, I'm looking at you, but for a lot of people, this is one of their like favorite franchises, and understandably so. Like I said, I've played a lot of the Metal Gear games. The only ones I haven't touched are on the PSP, and I may actually get to touch those here fairly soon, depending on how keen I am on being a pirate. Yar! But I'll get into that some other day. Uh, but yeah, like I said, Metal Gear, amazing series, wonderful games, like ridiculous conspiracy storyline. Like I said, that like Alex Jones would have trouble matching. And like I said, Kojima, like himself, has said it's over. Metal Gear 5, that's the last game, the last Metal Gear game I'm making. You know, and you have to understand what's the big deal about this. Why should I care? This is because Kojima, and I guess by extension Konami, for supporting Kojima, are famous for putting together these elaborate ruses for these ridiculous, outlandish ways of drawing together a narrative before a game's release. The most famous one, I think anyone would agree, is Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. All right. All the preview footage showed David Hayter voicing, of course, Metal Gear's Solid Snake. All right. Off parts where he was on this tanker ship, and like other parts of the game where he was on this oil platform, and everybody thought like, oh man, I cannot wait to play as Solid Snake in Metal Gear Solid: Sons of Liberty. It's going to be so boss. I cannot even begin to tell you how amped I am for it. That was the feeling in the air leading up to the release of Sons of Liberty. All right, then the game hits. All right, and for the first, I would say, half hour of the game, maybe not even half hour, but for if you go slow, it's a half hour. So for the first half hour of the game, you're playing as Solid Snake. All right, you're going around, you know, choking people out, using your tranquilizer gun, sneaking around, hiding in boxes. You may not have had a box at this point in the game, but go with me here. And you get to a certain point in the story, and the portion where Solid Snake is the main protagonist just stops. Okay? You stop being Solid Snake, and you transition over to this other fellow. And you're led on to believe this other fellow is Solid Snake. Alright? Up until the point he takes off his mask, and it's revealed he's not Solid Snake. And you spend the rest of the game playing as this guy named Raiden, or Raiden, if however you want to pronounce it. People lost their minds. Alright? They were they had fell for the ruse. Like, who is this Raiden character? Why am I not playing as Solid Snake? You know. Now, like I said, this game was still like hailed as like a great game by the fans. Maybe not right when it was released, but retrospectively, people like understood what Kojima was doing. Like, because in that game there was a lot of meta commentaries on what a game is, how a game is played, and so forth. And that's just the beauty of Kojima. I'll have to do a whole episode on that probably. I'm not going to do it right now because uh, I'm not that well versed in Metal Gear theology, the religion of Metal Gear, as it were. But no, definitely looking at. I may post a link if I remember to get into that. But yeah, like I said, so everyone was thinking Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty was gonna be all about Solid Snake, and Kojima flipped that on its ass, and you're playing as this other guy for the entire game. And of course, Raiden makes appearances in future Metal Gear games from that point forward, but you know, it for the future other Metal Gear games, you played as Solid Snake again, or the father of Snake being his boss, just or how would I phrase this? I'm trying to get into what Metal Gear is without actually getting into the story, and it's impossible. Suffice it to say, the character that is Metal Gear, the Solid Snake, all right, that guy, he pretty much stars in the show after uh, the end of Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. Like he takes the seat of the main character, so to speak. That, of course, now, like I said, I did mention David Hayter. That's another part of the ruse cruise led to us, we're being led on by Mr. Kojima. Um, the guy who plays on the, what is it? 24? Hold on. Thanks to my power of the internet, I'll Google this up here in just a second. Oop, 1 second. Sorry. My audio tripped out for a second there. I'm gonna Google him real quick. Don't actually do this regularly on the stream. You shouldn't do this.
You may need to hurry.
Jack Bauer, played by Kiefer Sutherland. Kiefer Sutherland. Okay, he is going to be the new voice of Snake, or technically the father of Snake, which is the boss. And like I said, I don't recommend going into the lore right now. I'll go over it at some point in the future. Suffice it to say, it's very complicated. And people got up in arms about that. People love David Hayter. All right, he is the iconic voice of Solid Snake. All right, so when people heard Kiefer Sutherland was going to be taking up the mantle of Snake, people justifiably lost their minds, and people were theorizing it was a ruse that Kiefer Sutherland isn't actually the real voice, and it's actually going to be David Hayter. And people kept on asking, and David Hayter himself said, "No, it's not going to be me. It's going to be Sutherland. Okay, it's definitely not me." But then you get conflicting kind of tweets and such that are saying, "Uh-oh, I'm dropping frames. I may have an issue with my stream. It could be my internet dying, which I would not be surprised by." One second. Alright, am I back? I think I'm back. I may need to start recording this as I'm doing it. I did not ever consider that I may lose a portion of my stream while I'm doing it, and I may need to save a different version of it to be recorded to, you know, YouTube later. So if I did lose a portion of my stream, I'm never getting it back, I guess. But hopefully that's not the case. Where was I talking about? Kiefer Sutherland taking up the mantle of Solid Snake. And like I said, David Hayter himself has tweeted, like, it's not going to be me, it's going to be Sutherland. But then there was, like, tweets from him that kind of were strange and were kind of misdirecting. So people are still theorizing, could he be reprising his role as the son of the boss, you know? Maybe he's like in a flashback sequence or something. And people are just losing their minds still. So there you have this, that and the other thing. All these crazy happenings tied to Metal Gear 5, Kojima, Konami, and so forth. And that's doesn't even end there. Just a couple days ago, for instance, the real-life Italian doctor by the name Sergio Canervo wanted to sue Konami for his likeness in Metal Gear Solid 5. And I may pull him up here in just a second. Let me go ahead and try and do that. I'm about to traverse some internets, and you'll see it pop up on the screen here in just a moment. Hang in there. I'm gonna pause the game. There we go. And allow me, through the magic of the internet, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you my Pokemons. Pop, 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 pop. Here we go. I'll have him up on the screen here in just a second. Okay. Now to put this in the context before I show you this picture. Let me see here. Oop, is this it? Okay, yeah. To put this in the context, this doctor, like I said, he looks exactly like this character in game. Like he has almost the same size glasses, the same kind of beard. Like I said, it looks like somebody took a picture of him and put him in the game. All right. Now, as supposedly, uh, like they've not contacted this fellow. Like they don't know who he is. Like he just kind of came out of the woodwork after somebody noticed that he has a likeness to this character in the game. Um, that like I think where he operates out of, it's somewhere near Italy. It's like right on, or like in a country right across from it. He does his work in that country. So there's a flag of the place that he does his work in the background of the game. So the correlation is almost way too bizarre to be mere coincidence. And of course, everyone who's on the Kojima ruse cruise, as it were, their conspiracy like sirens are going off the clock, around the clock, I should say. Let me go ahead and I'll pull this up here for you. Oh, oh, there we go. Maximize it. Okay. There's the doctor. There's the real life guy. Okay. So he has the round spectacles, kind of a point forward nose, a little bit of stubble, not too much, and you know, he's a rather old fellow. All right. And you look at this picture right below it. All right. Is the resemblance not uncanny? That's what I would say. Let me go ahead read a bit here. This is from PlayStationLifestyle.net. Thank you, PlayStationLifestyle.net, for providing the pictures. If it was you who provided the pictures, I'm not sure if they are the original originators, but stick with me here. A lot of crazy theories have been put onto the internet involving Dr. Sergio Canervo and the upcoming game Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Ever since Canervo announced that he will be attempting to do a full-body transplant in the near future, various gamers around the internet took notice of him and found that he bears some heavy resemblances to a doctor in MGS5. Not only did users from various forums such as NeoGAF find that the two look strikingly similar, but they found numerous other ways to link Canervo to the MGS5 game, which you can see here in a particular NeoGAF thread. So actually, let's go ahead and follow this ruse cruise to its in location. Be careful, we're browsing the internets now, so there may be some kind of something pop up that I'm not sure of, but we'll see here in a second. Let's see what we got here. All right, a lot of interesting pictures. All right. All right, here's this person, Mr. Slowdive or Miss Slowdive, whoever it is. They have the scoop. Here's everything so far. Dr. Sergio Canervo is part of the Turin Advanced Neuromodulation Group. Okay. This is Kojima on Taboo. I'm not sure what this is about, but let's read here. The next project will challenge a certain type of taboo, he wrote. If I mess up, I'll probably have to leave the industry. However, I don't want to pass by avoiding that. I'm turning 47 this year. It's been 24 years since I started making games. Today I got an ally who would happily support me in that risk, although it's just one person. For a start, it's good. So is this the person he allied himself with? We're talking about Hideo Kojima at this point. Uh, Okay. And the procedure for this transplant, which is a full body transplant or a head transplant, is called Heaven, which some have linked to there being a link to the actual in-game location of Metal Gear called Outer Heaven. Outer Heaven, head plant procedure called Heaven. People are like putting together these pieces. What is the deal? Uh, let's see. Okay, I did not read about this before. A person getting the transplant is a CG artist and a game development supervisor. I'm not going to follow that link because I don't know about that business. See, a head transplant in MGS5. Okay. And people are thinking that boss here, or the big boss, is going to be Frank Yeager. And if you don't know who Frank Yeager is, he is the guy who Solid Snake, which is son of the bosses. Okay, I'm starting to think about the story that I'm getting into here, and it's really just long-winded. So to keep it brief, they're saying that this guy is this guy, although historically speaking, neither of these guys are supposed to be like exactly the same guy. Does that make sense? You're probably more confused now than when I started, but suffice it to say, everyone's going nuts about this. Okay. Sergio is doing a talk in Cyprus, which is presumably where the hospital in MGS5 is. Wow. It's a location in the game anyway, according to PC files. Okay, so this may be the location that you see this scene take place in, but people don't know for sure. Let's see, what time we're... Oh man, I'm at 41 minutes. I'm gonna wrap up this bit here real quick. Uh, bu- 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 bu. Let's see here. Da, da, da. But yeah, if you want to read more of this yourself and get in on the Ruse Cruise, it's www.neogaf.com, and I'll post all that jazz at my YouTube link once I'm done uploading this bad boy. So yeah, suffice it to say, conspiracy people are going nuts. It's bananas. It is off the chain. Oof. Oh Nelly. Now let's get back to the game. Let's get back to this. Let's get back to this nonsense here. There we go. All right, now where were we? Yeah, the Kojima Ruse Cruise. I mean, there's so much to talk about, and like I said, I would go into more detail. But if you're not a Metal Gear Solid fan, it's all a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Like, so to an outside person, I imagine it's like trying to read up on the Kennedy assassination conspiracy nut files. Like, none of it will make sense unless you're like really involved in all that information. It's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo to you. But that's about all there is to that. Next point on the docket, a new Silent Hills game starring Norman Reedus, being directed by Guillermo del Toro and Kojima, has been cancelled. Naturally, I think this is part and parcel to Kojima leaving Konami. But as of late, the actual the demo for this Silent Hill game. And if you're not familiar with the Silent Hill game series, just to kind of give you an idea, it's a horror genre kind of deal. Not like the kind of game you're watching me play right now. It's a more suspense kind of horror. A very kind of... very slow-moving... what's the best way I can describe it? It's more akin to... I want to say Clive Barker's the thing, but that's not the right director. I'm gonna go to hell for that. Let me see. Who directed the thing? But I'm sorry, it's something I have to know right now. Uh, bu- 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 bu. Who directed it? John Carpenter. John Carpenter's The Thing. Where did I get Clive Barker from? That's from Dracula. John Carpenter's The Thing. That kind of the kind of horror that where you're not sure why you're afraid, you just are. It builds on a whole bunch of suspense, and then when you see something that is actually terrifying, your mind is having trouble grasping what it is you're looking at. That is the beauty of the Silent Hill series. It's very what's the word I want to use? I want to say nuanced. That's like close to what I want. Um, like I said, it's very very well done. So yeah, Silent Hill series, um, creepy horror game. was going to be worked on both by Kojima-san, which is he's a masterful storyteller, although maybe a bit heavy on cutscenes, if you will. And Guillermo del Toro, if you're not familiar with him, he's made a lot of good movies. Just basically, pretty much, if he's made it, you should definitely watch it. They were working together with Norman Reedus. And you're not familiar with Norman Reedus. He does Daryl on The Walking Dead. You know, honestly, I'm not that big a fan of Norman Reedus, but I won't say he's a bad actor. You know, he's good at what he does, and what he does is he makes women swoon. And I don't know how he does it, because like I said, he has a very Lee Van Cleef looking kind of face, but like I said, for some reason, chicks just dig him something fierce. I think it was like his appearance in Boondock Saints. Like that was one of his best movies, or one of his best movie series. If you've not seen it, it's a hyper-violent kind of shoot 'em up kind of deal. I recommend definitely giving it a watch. Alright, so I'm giving you all these names, all this information. What does it mean? What's happening? What the hell's going on here? Like I said, the game Silent Hill is, what's it called? PT, I believe it's called Silent Hills with an S. It has been canceled, alright? And people were really looking forward to this because we've not had an honest-to-goodness, really good Silent Hill game in a while. And I've played Silent Hill 2 and 3. I heard the ones that kind of followed after that weren't as bright a star, so to speak, so I kind of stayed away from those. But, you know, reasonably good entries into their respective genres, or franchise, I should say. But people were waiting on, like, a really, really good Silent Hill game. And this was going to be that game. This game was going to, like, knock every other Silent Hill out of the park. Or at least that's what it was supposed to do until it was canceled. So there's that. And, what do we else have on the docket? I wish I had more to talk about in regards to Silent Hill, but I honestly do not. Like I said, what can I say that I haven't already said about Silent Hill? Do not play Silent Hill if you're faint of heart, if you get scared easily. That game is several kinds of creepy. Yeah, that's about it. But let's see. What else do I have here? Up. Get over here. I got a couple different things. The Tech Corner. I'll call this Tech Corner. Basically, Tech Corner is, I guess, a sub-piece here in my show, which I'll talk about things in tech that bug me, or just problems or just whatever I want to talk about in regards to technology. Like I said, I'm not too big on technology, but there's certain things that I feel I have to talk about. And one of those things today is old people who are addicted to traditional television. And what the hell am I talking about? Okay, I worked for a customer service group who dealt with a lot of... One second. My internet's going nuts here. Make sure that I have a good connection before I start going on my rant. Okay, we're good. I worked for a customer service group who dealt primarily with cable TV, internet services, and phone services, okay? It's a big company, and there's only a couple companies, so if you roll the dice, there's a pretty good chance you can guess which one I worked for, but I'm not going to name names because that's not the kind of guy I am. Suffice it to say, I handled, you know, a lot of accounts on a daily basis. Mostly it was just technical support kind of stuff where I'm telling people how to get their TVs working, how to get their cable working, you know, that sort of deal. One thing I noticed as with a reoccurring theme with our customers was old people, I want to say in the age range of, I would say like 55 and up, are starting to lose their grasp on reality in regards to being addicted to television. You have to understand, this is a generation that grew up at the ass end of radio being like the main theater of the common folk, and when they were like 6 and 7 years old, they were getting into the television, black and white, you know, the old tube, as you might call it. So their whole life, all they've ever known is television, television, television. You know? And they knew cable television maybe towards the later part of their life, although cable television really didn't come into its own until I want to say the late 70s, like, but this was like way early. And then it like really started to blossom to like the early 80s, right down and all the way. It got bigger and bigger from the early 80s on throughout. So you have an entire generation born, raised on television. That's all they know. So if for whatever reason one of their channels goes out, not just like their whole TV, but if just one channel, if they lose one channel, that's enough to literally turn their entire world upside down. It's enough to make them have a conniption fit. You know, people were like, I talked to people before who would hyperventilate and cry to me over the phone, cry crocodile tears because one channel out of 1,000 they had was not working, because they've become conditioned, they've become addicted really to television. And I can see my generation facing the same dilemma in regards to the internet and maybe video games to some extent, but that'll be down the road for me, I'm sure. But for the old people of my generation, the old people, I guess my a little bit older than my dad's generation, and maybe a bit younger. Yeah, actually a bit younger. I keep thinking my dad's around that age, but he used to be 55 when when I was a wee little kid, just about. So he has to be pushing. Yeah, my dad's real old. But suffice it, but people in the 55 to 60 range right about now, uh, or a little bit older than that maybe. I'm not good with numbers. Yeah, maybe I should just shut up about numbers. But older people, suffice to say, they have an unhealthy addiction, I think, to cable format television. At least some of them, not all of them. Okay, this isn't. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here. There's a select people in our society that, like I said, they formed an addiction to traditional cable content. And what's scary is this: people in mass are moving away from cable. They're cutting the cable cords, suffice it to say. Um, Myself personally, let's see. Okay, I got a lot more time left. I thought I burnt through all my content somehow, but no, I got some more time. People are moving away from cable companies. All right, I don't pay for cable myself. My department what's it my apartment complex offers free cable, so I get my cable for free. But if I wasn't getting it for free, it wouldn't even faze me, because I would say 95% of anything I consume that's like in a video format, it is through the internet. I don't watch any kind of news, any kind of cartoons, any kind of historical stuff, any kind of whatever. I don't watch any of that on the television, because I can get it better, faster, more efficiently over the internet. So the question falls to me, the consumer: why should I pay for cable television? And the answer simply is I shouldn't. It's not a service that's useful to me. It's literally just eating up money. So you have people, like I said, all the way from age 15 to, if they're paying for cable that young, all the way to age, like, you know, and up, dropping cable, or to what most would consider traditional cable television. Excuse me, drinking a drink of water here. So what you're gonna have in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe less than that, you're gonna have people who are dependent on cable television, and they're gonna watch their cable television become more expensive as the people who are actually watching it, grow fewer and fewer in number. As more and more people are gonna cut the proverbial cord, as it is, and they're gonna need more people to kind of hoof the bill to make up for the difference. And what you're seeing right now is what's the word? A la carte. people want their content a la carte. They don't want to pay for services they're not using. They don't want to pay for services that aren't benefiting them, and that's what they're doing. They're dropping cable, and you're seeing HBO, Netflix, Hulu, these companies that cater to these demographics, to these people who just want to watch what they want to watch at a reasonable price. You know, and most people like I don't like sports. I have no need for ESPN. I don't care for ESPN. But if I were subscribing to cable, I'm going to get that channel whether I want it or not. And I don't want it. So I would not want to pay for it. And that's the same boat a lot of other folks are in. Cable, it gives you a lot of channels you don't want. And so the only rational thing to do is to cut the cord. And like I said, it's the people who are dependent on this traditional cable format that are going to be screwed. Their whole world is going to be rocked as gradually the content, the way they get it, is phased out. I don't know how cable companies are going to function in the next, like I said, 3 to 5 years, but it's going to start evolving here fairly soon. Like I said, on my way out the door, before I stopped working at the company that I mentioned earlier, I was privy to a little bit of information regarding the future of how content is going to be divvied up. Alright. Um, the last note at the end of me leaving basically was this. Cable companies are going to try to package everything together. Like I said, they've already done that. But they're gonna try to make it so you cannot have any one piece of their content without having the other. This is primarily focused at people who just have internet and nothing else. Um, like I said, if you already pay for cable and internet, you probably are paying for like a double play, as they're called, or a bundle plan, or whatever kind of jargon your company wants to use. All right. They're getting your services, putting them together, and they're gonna work on this. They're gonna kind of refine it, and that's what they've been doing. Like I said, for a while, they're gonna be trying to reduce your overall number of options to as few as possible, I think, to try to make it so that you can't really have one part of your service without having another. They're still going to have options, like I said, because they want to have like the lower end stuff so that they can kind of pitch the higher end stuff at times, like, oh, you only have this kind of content. Well, what you really want is this content. They want to still be able to do that, and they're going to have that available, because not everyone can afford the biggest, best package or packages or whatever they have. But like I said, this is going to work for people who are like adept at technology and know what they want and how to divvy up their content. But for people who, like I said, are older, who are less adept at navigating the internet, at searching out and getting what they want that way, their whole world's going to be flipped upside down pretty much. And like I said, it's not going to affect everyone. There's a lot of old people who are with it, who know technology, who get the transition, and they're transitioning happily. They're enjoying the better options they have. But there's an equally good number of old people who simply are, as the best way I can put it, set in their ways. They don't want to change how things are, and that's understandably so. Like I said, change is scary. Yeah, that's that's the note. Change is scary. Oh lordy. Uh, I hope they do okay. But like I said, I'm afraid for the old people because what's coming is it's like they're scared already. What's coming is going to scare them further. Oh lordy. Let's see. That's about it. I'm pulling in at just under an hour with all my talking points. So I'm happy because that's about the time I wanted to make it to. And I still have a good. Let's see. I got some time left on my pre-recorded content. I've noticed my content here that I'm streaming. It's a bit jaggy at times. When I tested it out, it wasn't this jaggy. What I'm assuming is it's just the nature of things, the speed that I'm streaming at, and so forth, isn't offering up quite the quality maybe I would have thought I had. But for the most part, apart from a few stuttering issues here and there, it seems to have held up more or less good. I'll have to check and see later the content once I've finished recording it here. And let's get a look and see how it actually ended up. I think that about covers everything. All the points I wanted to cover. And if you are an older person who's around 55 or older, like I said, I wasn't trying to go after you, you know. And not everyone is scared. not not everyone is afraid the sky is falling, you know. But I don't know, if you're an older person, you may know somebody like this who I'm talking about, who, like I said, is maybe set in their ways and does not want to change. Like these are the people I'm specifically referring to. But let's see. I have one other piece here, which I was going to go over some of the subtle differences in Phantasy Star and Star Ocean, because I've mentioned both those titles before in some regard, I'm sure, in the past. Maybe not on this show, but I wanted to go into that. But honestly, it's a piece I'm working on. I haven't dialed down that much content for it, so I wouldn't be comfortable getting into it right now. So that I may save that for next week's show. As for the docket for next week's show, I don't even know. I'm gonna start putting together some content here relatively soon. I'm hoping that this content turned out more or less okay. Like I said, I can't really tell until the button I press to stop streaming, I actually press it and I actually see what I get. But based on what I'm looking at, everything should have went swimmingly, save, like I said, a few stuttering issues here and there. But that's to be expected with streaming live content over the net. I think that's about everything. I didn't get anybody in the chat. If you are watching, or if you're watching, you say you don't have an account for Twitch, thanks for watching. I'll be posting this stream along with all my other content on my YouTube channel, which I'll have linked up in my main profile page. Of course, like, subscribe, click on whatever button there, which is good, click it for me. Or don't, you know, whichever button you want to click. You know, if you're one of those old people who don't know how to work computers, click all the buttons. Try Alt F4. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, that'll be a point I cover next stream. It'll be terrible tricks to play on people who don't know how computers work. That'll be my next tech corner rant. And in the next episode, I'll introduce the game corner, where I go over something in more depth that I'm really into, like which I said will be Phantasy Star and Star Ocean. But like I said, that about wraps up the show. Like I said, if you did watch, thanks again. Have a happy, whatever your Friday is gonna be. Yeah, tomorrow's Friday, so happy day off work if you don't work on the weekends. Have a nice weekend, folks. We're shutting her down. Shutting her down right now. Shutting her down.